Have you ever experienced something so crippling in your life that has made you feel broken? I have. Are you someone who has a giving heart but is struggling to feel good themselves? Are you consistently putting your needs aside to take care of everyone else? If so, you're not alone. Giving starts with giving to yourself so that you are able to give of yourself to other people. Isn't it time you took back control and discovered what makes you tick? Join me in my journey and find out how you can feel better about yourself, live your best life, and share that with others. Thinking of yourself, it doesn't make you selfish, it makes you brave. I'm Nelia, and this is the Giving Starts With You podcast. Welcome to the Giving Starts With You podcast, powered by Travel, Live, Give, and I'm your host, Nelia Hutt. If you're ready to expose and target the areas of your life that are not getting you closer to living your best life, then I have created just the thing to help you. I've created a Live Your Best Life blueprint. It's a free download that you can now get at www.travellivegive.com/blueprint/. This blueprint will look at 7 key areas of your life, from how you manage your mental health to how you show up in your relationships, from self-care to job satisfaction, and how and what you choose to spend your free time on so that you can start living the life you deserve, desire, and crave. Because after all, it's time to start feeling better and create a life that makes you proud. You'll also learn in this blueprint more about yourself. You'll get clear on what really matters. You'll stop making excuses and take action, and be one massive step closer to the life you want to live. Life is way too short not to live your best life. So what are you waiting for? Go to www.travellivegive.com/blueprint. Now let's tune into the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Giving Starts With You podcast. I'm your host, Nelia Hutt, and I'd like to say thank you for those who are listening and watching on YouTube for another episode, because I know that these conversations, and especially my conversation with Bill today, because I can tell through the screen already, like that he's a genuine person, and those are the best conversations that I could ever ask for on this podcast. But I can already tell we're going to learn a lot. We're going to share a lot. And I think some of his story is going to resonate with you. And that's what I'm hoping, because if he can do it, we can do it. So thanks for coming on the show, Bill. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy guy. So just to let you guys know a little bit about Bill. So Bill is the author of Thriving in the Storm, 9 Principles to Help You Overcome Any Adversity. And we all need the help that we can get. So thank you for writing the book. Bill has overcome PTSD from an abusive childhood, countless mental health challenges, and unexpected crisis. He went on to finish an Ironman, earn a black belt, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, in Krav Maga, and run the Boston Marathon 5 times. And he tells me that one of those times he was on crutches. What? So this is incredible. Thank you. And Bill will be speaking to us today about unique ways to harden our mindset to achieve our goals despite adversity. So I can't wait to speak to you about this upcoming book. But in order for us to get to know you a little bit better, how did your journey begin? Like, I know you've been through a lot of things, and we can't, possibly go into everything today, but can you give us a little bit of a gist of what you went through so we know where you're coming from and where you are, part of your journey?
Sure thing. Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, it was a lot of shaming, ridicule, a lot of physical abuse, and it was so normal that that's how I thought life was supposed to be. No, that was normal, right? And even my friends that I grew up with, we were lower middle class, and I just know a lot of my friends had really loving families, and my mom was incredibly loving, and she was more of my shield as often as she could be, but that didn't always work out. Nonetheless, I used to just love to hang out. But what started to happen was I started to do things even as a kid, um, in spite of, and I'll show you.
Mm.
The incredible motivation was I'm going to succeed here because you don't think I'm worthy. I'm going to succeed here because you don't think I matter. I'm going to succeed here because you make me feel less than. Now, incredible self-doubt and feelings of unworthiness that I still battle to this very day, and I'm 50, right? So it's been my fuel. But here's the thing: it took into my late 40s to realize that that fuel is okay for motivation to show somebody that you're more than you were led to believe, right? However, that's not your own motivation, so you're running from something instead of to something. You're running away from something instead of to something that's rewarding. So what happens is when you set goals and you're motivated to show somebody else that you matter, then you're not necessarily doing it for yourself. And then when you're on such a mission, you do things with blinders on, and you beeline to that goal line. You beeline to that target. You beeline, and you'll knock everything and anybody that's in your way over, and you don't get to enjoy the journey along the way. And that's very important, because that motivation gets exhausting. If you're always doing something to out of spite, then you're gonna have angst, you're gonna have anxiety, you're gonna have tension, you're gonna have anger, and that's all the stuff that I balled up. So, like, in my work goals, it was work 70 hours a week, come home, say hi to the kids, and I'd go back to work. And if the TV was too loud, I'm yelling and screaming at the kids, when they were young. I mean, they're adult children now, but I mean, adult kids now. But so we're processed through that. But those are the things that have happened. There was a test that I took in my late 40s, and you mentioned the PTSD. There was a test that I took in my late 40s when I was going through some counseling and in an intensive facility. And what that test was called an ACE test. It's an adverse childhood experience. And the clinician, he said, statistically, Bill, you should be dead or in jail based on what you've scored, or you're turning to violence, gangs, drug addiction, alcoholism, porn addiction, obsessive compulsive eating, you name it, right? And it's just the list goes on. What I turned to was workaholism and extreme sports. So I would always do everything I could to be out of the house. So I'd play every single sport I possibly could. And I like all sports, but there was, I would just do everything and anything that I could do to be out of the house. So I became immersed in my sports, but I would also, work as much as I could, whether it's get a paper route at the time, at 10 years old, or go shovel snow, or go rake leaves, or cut lawns, or, wash cars, like whatever it took. So I just always, my whole life, lost myself in work and some of my extreme activities, because the alternative was the other stuff that I could have gone on. So that is not without its consequences. Again, I'll tell you, the consequences for my behavior was I stuffed and suppressed and put everything deep inside the belly. and let it fester there, and then it would come out inappropriately with just, tension and just not doing enough with my kids, or being present, or whatever it was, because I would just be so involved in what I thought was important. You never heard anybody on their deathbed say, I wish I closed one more deal. You
Mm.
know, I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I did this with my kids. So luckily I was able to do a strong reset with all that. And it was, again, it was an intensive therapy. And here's how things get messy now. In 2019, I had just gotten, you mentioned this in the bio, so I'll share it with you. I had just gotten my black belt in Krav Maga, my first degree. I had just run the Boston Marathon. I had trained for an Ironman in 6 months when I didn't have a bike or I wasn't swimming. And an Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 mile marathon on top of it. And then I just had my best career year, and I made the most money I ever made. And I looked like the poster child of success. But when I crossed the finish line of that Ironman in
Mm.
November of 2019, what nobody knew, not one person except my mother, my sisters, and my family, my kids didn't even know. I was checking myself into an intensive psychological facility because I realized I was depressed.
Mm.
And it was a book that I read on one of my training sessions. It was I listen to a big Audible. A lot of people like to rock out on their music when they're running.
Yeah.
I geek out on my self-help books. But anyways, I was listening to Terry Reil's book, I Don't Want to Talk About It. And it was about men's depression 30 years ago, when
Mm.
that was not even talked about. And it was this, it's still a stigma and a stereotype today. Can you imagine 30 years ago? And so where I was, my eyes were completely opened is when I went and saw him. And I said to Terry, I said, Terry, that book resonated with me so much that your dad was my dad. I was you in that abusive, shaming, physically beat down environment, but I had it way worse than you. And he basically said, you're screwed unless you get help right away. And so I look like I had the life, yet I was a mess. I was in a lot of trouble. And
Mm.
so that's what I mean by running from something and not to something. All these beautiful things along the way was a mask.
Mm.
And it finally got clawed off me.
I have to say thank you for coming on. I don't get a lot of men wanting to open up about depression. And
I didn't want to.
I know. And I mean, it's hard for women as well, but I appreciate the conversation because I think the more we do it, the more men perhaps will feel comfortable coming out and talking about it. So thank you, first of all. Second of all, I'm 52. So on a lighter note, we do have some things in common. I also know how it feels to suppress feelings. I did it for 12 years when my father died, and I ended up 12 years later having the grief and new problems. So I get it. It's like one of the worst things you can do. Um, and I'm so, how do I say this? I understand how difficult that is when you're holding things in to try to protect yourself, but then things come out in different ways. So for you, you said it came out, with your family and with workaholism and everything. And when you took the test, you said, that your therapist, you said to you, sort of like, of course you have this. Why wouldn't you? It's sort of like we don't ask why he's doing it. We ask why not? Why not is he becoming either addicted to something, or of course something has to give. I mean, we're only human, right? So something has to come out of those things. Yeah, because sometimes people think, oh, I don't have a story, or my story is not as scary as somebody else's. And to us, it's just horrible. We're the ones sitting in it, right? It doesn't matter how big or how small we think it is. The feeling, of course, is huge. So I'm so happy that we're talking about this. And you're right, like 30 years ago. So we've come a long way, but it's not enough. So this is why I'm happy we're here to talk about the book. I want to know so much about what's in there, because I know you talk about that there's three things that you have to decide, right? You can decide to be a victim. I know you talk about just making it, and then like actually thriving. Oh, more than. And the goal is to do more than just survive, but first we have to get there, right? So how do you go from, the why is this happening to me, and becoming a victim, to doing that? Because I think that's really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, the victim mindset is, when we allow our circumstances to create our identity, and when that identity is set, a lot of times it's just a convenient excuse not to do anything
Yeah.
and live in that realm, right? And so, hey, this adversity, struck, and now I have a reason to call in sick, or I have a reason not to go to school, or I have a reason not to do that project, I have a reason to give up on my goal, I have a reason to give up here because this happened. And maybe it is
Mhm.
okay to do, but you got to get back. You got to get back up at some point. So if it's a grieving process, that's one thing. But if it's a reason to give up, that's a whole nother thing. So you want to be very careful when your adversity strikes. And the other thing is, um, when you're going through that adversity that is keeping you down and out, it's very important to flip that switch as fast as you can and identify and become aware of what those feelings and emotions really are. Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it hostility? Is it despair? Is it depression? Is it are you incredibly hostile or angry, or whatever is going on with you regarding that? Identify that, feel those feelings. But if you want to start to feel better, what you really need to do in that moment is understand what your blessings are. Like, what? Yes, this happened to me. I had a real rough day at work, or this happened to me, and I had a breakup, or I lost a loved one, or whatever. But, I am so thankful for my kids, my family, my health, my kids' health, the roof over my head, the air I breathe, the job I get to go to work to, the things I get to do. And again, there's a grieving process. So I'm not trying to, I don't want to scale anybody's adversity. I'm saying trying to get through things as fast as you can. So then you don't let that be an excuse to quit things that you started or want to start. And
I'm so glad you said this, because honestly, we can get comfortable and we can get lazy. Like I was the most comfortable when I was depressed because it was easy. I knew how it felt. I was comfortable in the feeling, and it took a lot to get out of it. You really have to decide for yourself. You can't do these things alone, but the decision has to come from you.
exactly. When life is great, doing things is easy. When life is tough, doing things that are going to get you to the next level that you don't feel like doing, with all the doubt and all the chirping on both sides of your shoulders in your ears that's coming along with it, telling you how you're no good, or how you're not worthy, or how you shouldn't even have started this to begin with. It's easy to pull those covers over your head.
Mhm.
It really is. So that's why, if you're able to get out of that as fast as you can, then you can thrive. And so one of the things that happens to us all is the more that we let our adversity sink us for a longer period of time, because stuff happens to us all the time, right? But think of it as a day. One day is not going to hurt, but what if you had, 40 days of being knocked down, and you let 40 days get away from you, as opposed to somebody else that said, you know what, I only let 2 days get away from me. Those other 38, I was able to pull up my bootstraps and get on with it. Think about how much more productive you are, and think about what you turn to when that adversity strikes. Maybe you're self-medicating. Maybe it's alcohol, drugs. Maybe it's sweets. Maybe it's junk food. Maybe it's binge watching Netflix, Game of Thrones. Maybe it's whatever it is that's you think is soothing, because you give yourself an excuse to stay down. So you got to be very careful of that too. I just need a drink. You know what? I had a really bad day. I need a drink. I need 2. I need 3. I need 4. And then your productive day that you had scheduled the next day, you just lost that day too, or a good portion of it.
Yeah, and I mean, even a simple thing as binge watching stuff. Like, let's just go with something a little easier that a lot of people do. It's just, it might make you forget for 15, 20 minutes, but when you're done, you're still as tired, you're still as angry, you're still all those things that you're mentioning. And I hear you talking all about, you just have to change the way that you think, your mindset, right? So I know a lot of people who may say, oh, but that's just the way I am. I can't do it. I'm not. And I'm like, you can learn different skills that will change the way you think. It's something that you can learn. Most of us have to learn. We're not born with all of these answers and these things that will help us, right? These strategies. So that's why you need to get the book. That's why you need to read books like that. And yeah, and learn all the things, because we're not born with the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things you said about mentioning, the depression is, I grew up with depression, but I never admitted it, not once, to anybody. You know what I said? Anxiety. I have a little bit of anxiety. I have a little bit of anger. I'm short-tempered. Don't wrong me. That kind of thing. Like, but I was hurting. I was hurting for a long time, and then I know you mentioned it, and we also wrote about it. So when I was at the intensive in Arizona in 2019, when I left there, because of my childhood trauma, they had said that I had PTSD. And I, at that time, and this is when I knew I had a lot of work to do, especially in retrospect. At that time, I said, no, I'm not worthy of that.
Wow.
There's no way that I could have that. That's a warrior's diagnosis.
Oh my God.
That's a soldier who saw combat.
Okay, you're blowing my mind, because I had the same conversation with my physician. I was like, no, 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 you can't say that. Like, you can't categorize me in the same category as these other people who have been through exactly what you're saying, war and all that. Sorry, I had to just kind of like, you're saying things and I'm like, oh my God, like I can feel it, because it's similarities that are just, yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You either. I want to be careful. But
Yeah.
so obviously I look back on that and I say, okay, yes, the stuff I went through was incredibly traumatic, and it was that I wouldn't wish upon any child, right? But to me, I talked about it as if it was matter of fact. Yeah. I patched up the wall that I got put through and knocked unconscious when I was 8 years old. Like that kind of stuff was talked about in a matter of fact. If you told me that story about, your neighbor's kid, I'd be in tears almost, just because I would be empathetic. So here's the other thing that I realized. I never had the self-care or love for my younger self. So that is something that a process. Now, when you talk about men that won't share their feelings, especially if it's of an ilk like depression, right? Men will cover up so many things that have happened to them, and kind of sweep it under the rug as if it doesn't matter. And so the self-love thing is
Mm,
a real thing. So like men don't have a lot of empathy for for their younger selves, especially in some cases. And that was me. And so I had to learn to love my younger self, from way back when. Like, it was okay. So we also need to forgive ourselves. And I think, that's part of the healing, part of the process. And and still thrive, right? So you're going through this process of these things, that you have the self-forgiveness, and you still have the self-care and the self-love. And here's where the magic happens, and the true healing, and fireworks explode once you can do this. Forgive the person that you felt wronged you, and send them blessings. It's a
mm,
lot of work, it's a lot of therapy, it's a lot of processing. But if you can do that, you have released that burden, that weight has been holding you down from whatever you're trying to do. And you can find so much happiness
mm,
for yourself when you do that. When you root for somebody's ill fate or bad karma, you're asking the universe to strike you down by lightning. So you got to be really careful on how you look at that. And then, it'd be easy for you to say, well, you don't even know what happened to me. And I don't.
mm,
And I can only imagine, but I know what happened to me. I just want people to understand that there's no comparison and there's no judgment. It's
mm.
just, we just want to help everyone heal that may be stuck with some unfinished business, or some past things that they didn't realize was holding them down, holding them back, allowing them to be the victim of their circumstances because it happened to them. So we want to help you get through that.
And sometimes you don't know the burden that it has on you until it's gone. And you can kind of exhale and be like, wow, that was even heavier than I thought it was. It's been sitting with me. And I mean, we know, but sometimes I sometimes you can exhale more and you can feel the lift being like how much was actually holding you down once it's gone, because you feel lighter, like happier, all these things that you're saying. I just have a question. So, Bill, do you think that not just for you, but men in general, do you think that they don't talk about certain things and depression because they're worried that it's going to make them be perceived as weak? Or is it
Oh
something else?
yeah.
Or is it something else? I just want to bring it out there. Like, what do you think people are going to say?
Oh yeah. I would call you soft growing up.
Mm,
If a dude in my high school said he had depression, would probably be out in the back brawling.
yeah.
But that goes to show you how much I wanted to cover. I was covering up my own stuff.
Mhm.
It's very hypocritical. But since I wrote this book, some of the toughest people that I've ever met or known they were like, man, I had no idea. And I went through that too. And I just never wanted to talk about it. Thank you. I'm like, you really?
Oh, I love that.
And then they get real with their feelings. It's so we mask. We mask. There's a lot of work to be done, Nelia. I mean, the death by suicide is a real thing. It's 4 times more likely that males will commit suicide than females, because females talk about it, and they help process their feelings, and it needs to be addressed.
Tragic. Yeah, it's tragic. Just this year, I know two teenagers who have committed suicide. Just this year, both boys. And it's very tragic and very sad, but yeah, you just don't know. You don't know what it's like to be in somebody's situation. You don't know what it's like to live in somebody's life. And it's so crucial and so important for men and women to just start having the conversations. I hope that, we have come a long way in 30 years, but I hope that we can keep growing and keep, the more we talk about it, the more men can talk about it, the more women can talk about it, the more people will come like that person, that came to you in your book. And I think that we will realize how much more people suffered from depression that the statistics think they do. It's so much higher than what's reported, and especially for men, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that shouldn't be quieted. A lot of times we feel like we don't want to appear weak, or who's going to care about our story, or somebody's going to make fun of us, or whatever it is.
Right.
It's another way of us protecting ourselves. If people don't know, they can't hurt us anymore, but yet we're hurting ourselves.
Right. Absolutely.
Hmm. So, what would you say is the biggest gift you ever gave to yourself that made you change the way you thought about who you are?
It really was the process of um learning to
Hmm.
love me. And even saying that out loud is difficult. Like, I thought I grew up as a guy that, like I said, if you had those emotional, we call them emotional weaknesses, you'd be considered soft. And so it's it's real. Mindfulness, mental health is really needs to be it continuously needs to be addressed, because there's a lot of people that are hurting, and they don't talk about it. So getting in touch with your true younger self, or yourself, it was, I still battle, I battle every day, but I have the tools and the practices and the routines and everything else that equip me to continue to try to live at a higher level, and stay, instead of being brought down when the circumstances do happen.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you've been able to share this with us today, because I think it's going to really help people going living in this world where people don't know. I mean, even if you don't want to share the details of something that you've been going through, it's okay. But just to tell people, hey, I need help is huge. That's different than having to air all of your laundry if you don't want to do that. But if you don't say anything, then you're really the one losing out, because, as because you're not able to show up in the world for your family, for yourself. Nobody wants to hurt that much forever. There are things that happen to us in certain times in our life. And in my trailer, I say, so many times things can break us. And talking about it sometimes is the difference between having it break us completely, or having us realize, hey, I have these things, they're a part of me, but they're not who I am. I'm not defined by these things. And I
Right.
think it's important to know that, so that we don't hate ourselves. A lot of people go around this world hating themselves because of things that happen to them, where it's not their fault. It
Yeah.
wasn't your fault that these things happened. And we can't go on our whole life suffering and repeating these things in our mind, when, let's say, this took place 10 years of our life and we lived to 80 years old. We can't let those 80 years be all about suffering. And you know we do need to try to help ourselves as much as possible.
Right. We do. And just be aware of our own self-talk. we're,
Yes.
we're very hard on ourselves in our self-talk.
I'm so glad that, honestly, that I have this platform to interview people like you, and to interview um, and speak about these important topics, because we really need to share them. We really need to speak to our kids about them. It changes everything. It
Yeah.
changes how we feel about ourselves, how we show up in the world. It changes how we're there for other people. It changes our empathy, our anger. Like you said, it can even prevent us from being addicted to different things that then take another turn. It's just like it snowballs out of control. And
Yeah.
we really have to be our biggest advocate and believe in ourselves. So, what do you do now for your self care and self? like to help yourself, like day to day? What type of things do you do when you're faced with all of those, emotions here and there?
Well, I mean, I have a very strict routine. It's a daily routine. It's the morning routine and an evening routine. The morning routine
Mm,
is, I get up super early because I do a lot of I'm training for different events. And that will include breathing. I'll do some breath work. I'll say my prayers, thank my higher power, my Lord, for my blessings. And then I do a little bit of prep work on my work with my coffee, and then I'm off to my workouts, and that prepares me for my day when
mm,
stuff gets thrown at me. Now I built up that resilience. I built up that fortress. I hardened myself against the things that are going to get thrown at me at that day. But I have the same routine where I don't allow, you know, I try not to allow, negativity, adversity, bad news enter uh, enter my mind or my
mm.
life, before bed. If it's a call from the kids, or if it's a call from a loved one or a text or something, then I have to take that. But for the most part, like I'm not watching a show. I'm not watching news. I'm done scrolling a good hour or so before I crash. I'll journal a little bit. You can journal on your phone. You can journal by your bedside. I mean, just what were my 3 wins today? What were my lessons today? What am I grateful for today? And that's just there's things you can do to help you. Now you set yourself up for a good morning
Mm.
if you go to bed that way, and yet taking care of yourself with your getting the sleep, proper nutrition, the physical activity, but the mental activity too is very important. The breath work, the visualizations, the meditations. There's just so many things that we can do to take care of that self-care. I mean, and obviously take care of your body. I mean, if you can go get a massage, get a massage. If you can go get some acupuncture, if you can go take a yoga class, do some foam rolling, stretch, whatever that is, that's gonna help you as well. So there's so many things that I do and you can do to do that self-care thing.
Thank you for sharing that because I can give people some ideas as well. And a lot of times people think self-care is just having bubble baths. And so we talk about that on the show because it's also doing the boundaries and the priorities and deciding what you want your life to look at, giving yourself intentional time for you, right? And
Uh,
most people say, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy, but you have to make time because it'll slow down time too. Don't you find that when you're taking that intentional time to do the things that you've set up for yourself, that it just slows things down a little bit?
yeah, it does. It definitely does. When you're deliberate on what you want to do. And so like you joke about the bubble baths, but seriously, if you want to
Yeah.
say, I just Calgon take me away, if you want to do that,
Oh, absolutely.
throw some Epsom salt in there.
Yes, absolutely. I
Right?
just meant like
Right.
it's not all about that. It can be about just saying no sometimes, you know?
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bill, I know that you like to give back as well. And on the show, we talk a lot about that and how it makes us feel
Yeah.
so good. And I know that you do that. I know that you do that and you've done so. You've raised over $500,000 for Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? And you do that through your like sponsorships and through your donations for your running and your athletics.
Yeah, a lot of it's through that. And then, I've been in sales for 25 years. So since 2006, we've donated every single month on behalf of our clients to Make-A-Wish, and haven't missed a month. So that helped towards that 500K.
I love that so much, because that's part of self-care too. I find that that's one of the things that helps me the most feel connected and feel grounded is doing that. So I want people to see that that's also not only you're helping other people, but when you give, it helps you. It makes you feel good. and it puts everything kind of into perspective too. So I love that you do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything about your book that we didn't talk about today? I know you want people to read it, obviously. Where can we buy the book? Where can we find it?
Sure. Anywhere books are sold. I mean, Amazon and anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, and it's in hopefully a lot of bookstores. Or they can go on my website if they want a bulk order, thrivinginthestorm.com. And there's some resources in there. And I talked about the journaling, the morning and evening journals are in there, along with the emotions.
Mm.
Is on that website. And some of the exercises we talked about today are also some exercises. I think we had 21 exercises in the book that's downloadable on the website as well.
Yeah, I noticed there you offer a free chapter of your book. People sign up for your email and
Yep.
they get some resources. So I encourage everybody to do that. This way you can get a taste of what it's all about and you go out and buy the book. And sometimes you just have to buy it for somebody else. Sometimes people who are suffering, they don't buy these things for themselves. And, we all care about people in our lives, and sometimes we know that somebody might be suffering and they haven't really come out and said. It could be a nice, quiet way to just say, hey, I got your back. I know there's something going on, where maybe they're not ready to talk to you about it. Things like this make really good gifts that are not, it can be done privately as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have an Audible version? Because I know you like Audible.
Love Audible. It's in the works. Hopefully, be recording in May or June.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yep.
Cool. I used to be one of those people. I used to go to high school and take the Toronto subway and have those self-help books, even as a teenager. And I used to cover them with this brown paper because I'm like, oh my God, I'm reading, Child of Alcoholic Parents. What are people going to think if they see me reading this, right? So I used to cover the covers of the books. And now with Audible and podcasts and all of these things, you
Right.
can, I was always, oh, people are going to think I'm broken. I'm reading a crazy book. So there are other ways to do this. And it's okay. Just embrace the crazy. Sometimes I say that all the time. It wasn't until I like accepted all of these things that happened in my life that I was like, I'm okay with it you
Yeah.
know and it doesn't mean that you're not lovable. It doesn't mean you're not it doesn't mean you're weak, whether you're a guy or a girl. I think girls worry about that too, maybe
Sure.
not as much as dudes, right? But it's the beginning. Take that first step, because if you don't, nothing's going to change.
Nope. It's not going to change.
I mean, your life in 5 years could be so different, or it could be exactly the same, or even worse, because sometimes as things goes on, things get worse, not better, when you don't talk about it.
Yeah. I agree.
So thank you, Bill, for coming and talking about your book. I'm so excited that you wrote it. I think it's very necessary in the world today.
Well, thank you. And I hope there's some takeaways for folks that do pick it up. And if there's anything I can do, feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. So again, it's Thriving in the Storm, 9 principles to help you overcome any adversity. And we all have those. Honestly, we do. So we're all equal here. We're all equal. We all have our own things. And yes, some are bigger than others, but that's in the eye of the beholder, right? Thanks, Bill. And I wish you luck with everything and continue on your journey, and keep talking about this. This is important work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe or leave a review. See you next week on the Giving Starts With You podcast. If you're ready to expose and target the areas of your life that are not getting you closer to living your best life, then I have created just the thing to help you. I've created a Live Your Best Life blueprint. It's a free download that you can now get at www.travellivegive.com/blueprint/. This blueprint will look at 7 key areas of your life, from how you manage your mental health to how you show up in your relationships, from self-care to job satisfaction, and how and what you choose to spend your free time on so that you can start living the life you deserve, desire, and crave. Because after all, it's time to start feeling better and create a life that makes you proud. You'll also learn in this blueprint more about yourself. You'll get clear on what really matters. You'll stop making excuses and take action, and be one massive step closer to the life you want to live. Life is way too short not to live your best life. So what are you waiting for? Go to www.travellivegive.com/blueprint.